Hello, I am Rhonda Hull, and today I have my dear friend and newly retired caregiver, Raea Stika, as my guest. I recently had the honor of interviewing her about her lifelong personal and professional calling as a caregiver. Usually I am the interviewer, but today the tables are turned. I thought it might be worthwhile to have Raea ask questions of me, and through this process, you might gain greater clarity about the breadth and meaning of my work and my services. Now, I am obviously a great overthinker, and it is often the case that until questions are asked of me, the answers swirl around in my head, remaining unclear. And I don't know that I'm the only one that has this challenge. Yet somehow magically, when responding to a question, at least for the moment, I am able to bypass my inner critic, allowing wisdom and insights that I might have come forward. So I have to let this information fall out of my mouth, and through that, hopefully I have a clearer understanding of what it is that I do. So when I listen to what gets channeled through on the spot without overthinking and self-judgment, I can sometimes be pleasantly surprised by a flush of appreciation that I may actually have something valuable and helpful to share. So today, Raea will ask me a few questions and we will see what happens. So Raea, I am turning it over to you. I want to start us off with this quote by Steve Jobs. I'll let you read the quote.
Okay, well, welcome, Rhonda, and thank you for sharing your very wonderful work that you have been doing for so many years. It's so precious to have in our universe. So Steve Jobs once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever." So we're going to start with asking you, dear Rhonda, to tell us a little about the dots of your life that have connected you to the work you do now.
Okay. It's interesting how when you're living it forward, you don't often see the connections, but in looking backwards at the dots, it makes more sense. As a little girl, I was shy and dyslexic and uber sensitive. And so early on, I took on the story that I talk too much and I talk about things that other people don't understand. And I think I always have been an introvert. When I was 17, I had a near-death experience that shifted me from a real indoctrinated Catholic foundation to pivoting to really understand the fuller capacity of life more through a lens of spirituality, that because I had this experience that we are all one and we are all connected. So all roads lead there, and that love is the guiding force. And what I discovered is that through coming back after that experience at 17, there still wasn't anybody talking about near-death experiences. And I felt pretty crazy when I tried to convey to anyone what had happened. So I just put that deep down somewhere. and had a real challenge making sense of it because what I experienced was so incredible. And coming back, I just didn't fit into my body anymore. And being human instead of an adventure was pretty painful because I had a knowing of what it is in its purest form, and now I'm back contained by this body and trying to make sense of how you maneuver through life. So ultimately, I married and followed the path. You know, I was headed for the convent, but I detoured. I followed the path of becoming a mom and got very involved in childbirth education. So I was a birth doula, labor coach. I did birth photography, and even in welcoming babies into the world, I would look at these precious little beings and have a knowing of that veil where they now have come through this tunnel and they're into the light. And in preparing kids at that time, doing sibling childbirth classes, I would have conversations with kids who were 2, 3, 4, 5, asking them if they remembered where they were born, thinking that they would tell me, oh, I was born in a hospital or I was born at home. And instead, they were telling me about life before being here. They were talking about being confined in a dark place, and then all of a sudden it got light. They would have their memories of heaven, whatever you call heaven, that pre-birth experience or energy that we are. So that was another awareness to me that I'm hearing things that these kids are saying that were just generally overlooked by everybody else. But I found it's such a privileged time to be with women at this incredible process of giving birth that was sometimes really easy and sometimes really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there were lots of people there. Sometimes women would be, for the most part, alone, perhaps with the midwife. Sometimes a baby would be born before the midwife would get there. Then having my kids and my hippie years were just the most glorious time. But there came a period of time where I lost my grandmother, which you can kind of justify because she was old, even though she was really a mother figure to me, because my mom worked. So then I had a dear friend who I had been present at the birth of all of her kids. And when her third son was born, I was present. And then 2 weeks prior to his first birthday, he drowned in their hot tub. And then I had, just a couple of weeks after that, a college friend that I had not seen for maybe 7 years. And I had the opportunity to reconnect with them on the following Monday. And what I learned was that over that weekend, he had drowned in a rafting accident. So, you know, when I look back, I see my grandmother who passed really with her lungs filling up. This baby drowned, my friend drowned, and my near-death experience was the near drowning. So in hindsight, I can see that the dots connected there somehow. But it sent me into this incredible, at that same time in California, we had 2 back-to-back earthquakes that really rattled me to my core. Even though since my near-death experience, I wasn't afraid of dying, those earthquakes rattled my spiritual core and ultimately led me to anxiety overtook me. And I thought, well, knowledge is power for the intellect mind of mine that keeps spinning. So I'll learn all about earthquakes. Well, the more I learned, the more I knew that in California, no matter where you stood, you were standing on a fault, and it just exaggerated it. And I had a newborn, a 6-month-old at home, the responsibility of a mom. It just all got to me with that postpartum overwhelm, and which ultimately led me to doing a life, death, and transition workshop with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is the grandmother of the 5 stages of grief and all her work in hospice and death and dying. So that is the opportunity that I had. And through that intensive experience doing work with her, I realized I wasn't really afraid of death. I was afraid of life. I was afraid of living. And so that experience, consciously or unconsciously, led me through more and more often being at the bedside of those who are passing, or walking with people at other times of loss, whether it was a divorce or loss of a job or menopause or whatever that transitional moment was. And ultimately it led me, my personal growth work led me to realizing that I wanted to speak more and more about what my near-death experience had taught me, and to expand the conversation about death in a way that we could regard it as a very essential part of life that reminds us all the time to live more fully, and how regardless of the circumstances, there always is joy, even in the most challenging moments. So I've been with my grandnephew when he at 2 was diagnosed with cancer, and by just being a presence of holding this space during that, or like with my grandson who is still on his journey with autism, holding this space for possibility within those really challenging times, that there is great joy possible. So regardless of what the veil is that we're walking through, and at death, it just happens to be like birth, where people are grieving on this side, but you're being welcomed on the other side. And at birth, they're grieving on that side, but you're welcomed on this side. It's all part of this incredible journey, human 3-dimensional reality that we experience called life. And it's only by really recognizing that my near-death experience tapped me on the shoulder and said, you will be a bridge person between those experiences, your experience of your near death that tells you that love is the answer to every question, and the human experience where we're afraid of death, because I think we're afraid of life, or we're afraid of the uncertainty that comes before death, regardless of what your religious background or training might have been. So those are the dots that kind of led me to this moment with this gray hair saying, you know, it doesn't matter as much anymore what people think of you, or you have nothing to hide, and you just be who you are. And if it matters to someone, if it supports someone, it does. I just need to do what I'm called to do and go where I'm called to be, and to do the best I can in my own humble way of making my mistakes and learning from them, and walking with others. It's like there's no guru, as much as we would like there to be. It's really all just about being courageous enough, which means being vulnerable enough to share that we all have wisdom and we can cross collaborate. I think that's another piece of it. I am a really right-brained person, and I've always, in the past, I have envied those people who know what their calling is. Like, you have always, always, always been a caregiver. That has showed up consistently. I have gone down many paths, from an artist to a teacher to a childbirth educator to a mom to a counselor, birth doula, death doula. It's like, what is the it that I do? I just know that the consistent thing is holding the space for people. And I've realized that there is value in me being a cross-pollinator who goes a multitude of directions and who talks and writes and says, oh, hey, you guys, you should know about this over here, or what about that, or I can kind of point you down the right road here. So somehow, in whatever way, it's coming together to be what it is now. And I pray that it can be of service to anyone, to help them feel a little more, to treasure themselves more and appreciate who they are, and to know that death is a reminder to live fully.
You know, many individuals, humans out there, we don't connect the dots. And so for you, through your training, I'm sure it has helped a great deal, is for you to be able to look at yourself now and be able to connect the dots. From your, I mean, there's not a lot of people that have had near-death experiences. So you're very lucky. I don't know, there's a better word than lucky, but you're fortunate for sure to have had that in your life, and you used it. It was a springboard for you.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you another thing. Some of the losses in your life, what have they taught you? What have they taught you?
To be present. When we step into fear, all of our creativity and what we know just dissolves, you know, it pixelates. Not being afraid of that moment, it's where I can hold the space for others at that time. So death has taught me how to just be present in the moment. I know one of the most important times that somebody did that for me was my sister when I went through my divorce. She somehow could be my logical mind while I was just emotionally crumbling. So even though I have had that near-death experience of near drowning, the truth is we've all had those moments in our life where we've experienced a death of some kind, that loss that takes you from what is to what's next. And at that point, we always have that choice point. It's given me the practice of recognizing the choice point. Death has taught me that we are love and that we are energy, the energy of love. And that is what is, regardless of what we see. So death, my near death, and observing people who die, it's like people are not talking about, they should have spent more time at the office, you know, on their death. Those are the regrets that we have if we don't live fully. So death becomes that reminder to live it fully.
So that, wow. I mean, to have that knowing at this time is a gift, really.
Yeah, because we can't
and
help.
So they gave you that gift.
Yeah, we can't help but have our human experience, like of shock, loss and anger, and but you know, it's like sometimes I'll hear of someone's passing, and although I feel the grief, I also feel great joy
Mm-hmm.
because I know what I experienced at that moment. And
Mm-hmm.
it, in my experience, it all equalizes then.
Mm-hmm.
So death has taught me that you can't fail. Death has taught me that it's a human quality to judge. It's that judgment day on the other side isn't like what we imagine it in our human form. So it's called me forward to match up with being love, using love as my compass, but I know I can't fail as long as I'm taking steps. So it has allowed me to be in very difficult times because there is most of the time, I have my moments, but most of the time there is a knowing that all is well.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have that experience that when it does get too tough, we lift out of our bodies and observe it. We aren't experiencing the same degree of suffering that it appears when you're watching someone you love go through a really difficult, challenging moment.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, one of the most profound things that she taught me that death teaches us that I've witnessed is that she would do profound, deep grief work with people during our time together. And they would be in tears with snot coming out of their nose and just really in a deep, deep grief place. And me, as a newbie in the grief death arena at that point, I was saying, oh, hug her, him, hug her, hug him, hand them a Kleenex, rescue, fix. Everything in me wanted to make it better. And what I recognized is it was because it was triggering my pain. And what she was able to help me begin the journey of seeing was that we all are capable and that I need to hold that person as capable rather than rush into fix or save. I can serve. Serve is, being of service puts us on equal ground, an equal
Mm-hmm.
exchange of energy. You give, I receive, I give, you receive. But fixing is, I can do it better than you can do it. It's a power over model. So she taught me to have that, to at least have it be a practice to see people as capable of having the strength to weather through a death, a loss, a disappointment, and that we each have our journey. My journey is not that person's journey. So death has taught me, continues to teach me.
And yeah,
it's all a journey of death and rebirth.
yeah, that I think as a caregiver, I certainly learned that I had a partnership with the people that I was involved with, and they were giving and I was receiving. I was to be there for them, but we were walking together.
Right.
And so it is part of the importance of relationships
Yes.
as we're walking in this human experience. Relationships are vital because that's where we can learn so much from another. So I'm looking down here. Why is it important for all of us to expand our ability to talk about death and dying?
I feel like one of the greatest gifts we have in this human experience is choice. And whether it's preparing for your birth, I can remember walking with women and families through creating their birth plan. And now working with people writing their advance directive and creating their end of life plan, the best of plan is subject to change. You know, as the human, we want to control and say, now that I have it on paper, it has to happen this way. And I can't tell you how many times I was at a birth where it was, you know, the pretty curtains are on the wall, the music, they want to have all of that, but then instead of a 3-hour labor, it turns into a 36-hour labor that then leads to a cesarean. It deviates. So you say, well, was it worth writing the plan for your birth or for your death? It is so essentially valuable because what it does is get us clear on what our values are. And so the conversation about death, it used to be that my doctoral dissertation was on children at birth. Like, is it a traumatic thing for kids to be present at a birth? Everybody assumed that for the 2, 3, 4-year-olds, it would be horrible. And that the older you get, the easier it would get. Well, what I experienced is that it was more challenging for those teenagers, especially girls, because they could identify with what was going to happen, whereas 2, 3, 4-year-olds would take it as matter of fact. But the more information they were given, even though I learned that no matter where I stand in California, I'm standing on a fault, it gives me the opportunity to say, now what am I going to do with this information? I'm at one of those choice points again, where I can either go down the road of fear, or I can go down the road of seeing the possibility or the power within it and get to the truth of what is really scaring me. So then you get to live more fully. So the conversation about death hopefully bumps each of us into an awakening of, am I living my life as fully as I can? And not my life compared to somebody else's, not from a place of judgment of woulda, shoulda, coulda, but, oh, you know what? This moment matters. This is the only moment I have. My mom, being with her when she died, we hadn't talked about death. Her generation barely talked about anything, you know? So it wasn't until the night before she died that we got to have a heart-to-heart conversation. And I would say, well, Mom, you know, we really ought to talk about these 40 years, my whole life, where you were alcoholic and you were a workaholic, and let's go through all of the sordid details of why I was not thinking I was enough, that I was blaming on my mom. In that moment, she would say, I'm so sorry. I get it now and I apologize, but I don't know how long I have. I could die any moment. Do you want to spend I'm here now. Do you want to spend our time talking about the past or be here now? So boom, she brought me back to present moment. Then I would find myself talking to her about, well, you're not going to be here when the girls graduate from high school and when they have babies and marriage and yada, yada, yada. And she'd say, I will be there. I just won't bring my body now, but I'm here now. So she would bring me back from the future to the present moment. So that conversation about death, I think, lets us accept that it is a part of life. It opens the door to who we are and what we know, and hopefully transforms each of us to see our destiny, our gifts, all dropping the lens of judgment and being able to see the gift that we are, and how whether we did anything right, as if right or wrong exists, whatever we did before this moment can change in this moment. And as long as we live this moment, then this moment, then this moment. So that's what death, the conversation about death is so potent, because it's been such a taboo topic that once you get started, you find it's not as scary as you thought it was.
Right. And the realization of that for each person is profound. It's profound, and it is taken us to a place. I think maybe years ago, 100 years ago,
Yeah.
people, it was more of a birth and death kind of situation, because there wasn't a lot you could do to stay alive.
Right.
But now we have so much technology, and there's so many things that the doctors can try,
Right.
that we now feel like we have a choice,
Right.
about trying everything,
Right.
or not. So this realization that you're talking about is just to sit with that, and to have someone that can help you to facilitate it, because a lot of times we just really need someone to facilitate our thoughts. We can get stuck.
Because back 100 years ago, death was, and birth happened at home.
Yes.
It's pretty matter of fact. And it's not that they weren't sad, but it was witnessed as a part of life, especially
Yes.
in the farm. You saw animals be born, you saw the circle of life, you saw crops grow, you saw that it was matter of fact. And at that point, it perhaps wasn't a topic of conversation, but it was witnessed. It was
Witnessed. Mm-hmm.
It became a part of your experience. Home birth, and when you go to, it was right in the, I think it was the 30s, 40s, where funeral homes became an industry, a financially profitable industry. And they were called funeral parlors, because it used to be that the parlor was at home, was where the bodies laid out for 3 days, and everybody would come and visit. There's such an amazing history of how our perceptions of death. Well, now we have gone to this point of quantity rather than quality. And to me, that's what an advanced directive opportunity, or reviewing, talking about death and looking at the legacy of your own life, it gets you clear about, do you want quantity or quality? And how do you make those two meet? And it empowers you to know that even though you aren't ultimately in control, if you have your plan, it's the gift to others who can see what your wishes are and uplift them to the best of your ability. So it's where the universe and your written wishes get to collide, and others get to facilitate whatever your ultimate end of life journey moment is supposed to be like.
So the death doula was something that it came out of what? How did that come out?
In a community, it's where just like there was a midwife, and sometimes it was the midwife who would come and stand vigil, or the family would stand vigil. And death was so common that they could distill what the stages were and what to expect. And certainly in times of war, that death doula became whoever happened to be around. And what we're experiencing now in this time of the pandemic and COVID-19 is like 80% of us want to die at home. Only about 20% of us will. Those are just the statistics. And now we're faced with this time where, as much as we want to be able to be with someone when they pass, it's that frustrating conundrum, because we want to control it, that, oh, now they're in a situation where they are either in a hospital or an assisted living facility and you cannot be with them physically. So we're having to depend on technology or the compassion channeled through whoever their frontline caregiver happens to be, to help them cross over in as peaceful a way as they possibly can amidst a really difficult time. So that death doula has been a role that sometimes was assumed by people, and ultimately now it's becoming a profession. Because we have such an allergic reaction to death, some people just are too uncomfortable to be there. Some dads have been reluctantly dragged into the delivery room, you know, or the birth center. The more we can stretch our comfort zone, the better, because we don't learn much in our comfort zone.
No.
We expand by stretching beyond our comfort zone. So in this time of the coronavirus, everyone has bumped into their mortality. You can't avoid the conversation. It's on you're talking about death every time you turn on the TV set. It's so important we don't numb out to it. But just like any relationship, you have to invest in the relationship with the conversation about death in order to begin to feel comfortable with it, because nobody gets out alive. Like birth, it's one of the two things that we all share in common. We all are born and we will all die, and we are dying from the moment we are born. So
it's really been a natural state of affairs for you to go into being a death doula, especially because you're now a mature woman.
Yes.
At the time that you were a birth doula, you were a young woman having just had your own children. And now it's been a natural journey for you as a doctor. Is it a doctor of psychology?
Yes.
Yes.
I've been that cross-pollinator. So at times stood in that role of death doula for friends. And now I feel like the most valuable role I can be as a consultant and a coach and a counselor and a disseminator of information. And I just know somehow I get called to the right opportunity to be that in any given moment.
Yes.
But I feel like all of those dots brought here. And, you know, I wrote my book, Drive Yourself Happy, a motivational maintenance manual for maneuvering through life. I wrote that right on the heels of 9/11. So it's a book on happiness that I then couldn't publish. I could publish, but I couldn't promote it because the airplanes were grounded. And who was going to want to talk about happiness at a time that we were thrown into, as a nation, into this pit of grief that now the whole globe is thrown into? So at that time, I leaned away from the challenge of talking about how you can be happy regardless of your circumstances. And it led me to a whole lot of other learning experiences, being hospice for a part of hospice for my mom and others, and our friend Nanciana, who chose to do death with dignity, and it's put me in different positions. But now here we are at COVID-19, when I have really found myself gathering together all of the information and helping people write their advance directives. And here we are at one of those crossroads again, where COVID-19 has unavoidably taken us all to the edge of our comfort zone, saying, here is death. Again, you can't avoid it. It's on the TV set all the time. You can either retreat or you can shift your perspective about it and expand just a little bit your ability to talk about it, not as an enemy, but as an opportunity to treasure the life moment you have, moments that you have
right now. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And wow, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. Yeah.
That it has that message for us, and everyone who you sit with who is going through the dying process will say to you, oh, I wish I'd done this, or and they're very simple, beautiful, simple things that they're talking about. It's not that I wish I'd traveled around the world.
Right, right.
It's about, I wish I had spent more time with this person or that person.
Right, exactly. And Raea, I'm sure, I know that you know from having stretched your capacity and your comfort zone to the point that you can and have many times been with someone, if not at the moment of their passing, in those final days. It is such a sacred, sacred time, even when it is a really difficult passing, because the mental part of your relationship dissolves and you have this incredible opportunity to connect with someone heart to heart. And when you allow that to happen, you experience that even though their physical form will be absent, they live on. There is a way that you can still feel the loss of them in human form, but such a relief of knowing that they are always, always a part of who you are now. They are imprinted.
And if it wasn't a great experience that you had with that person, what you learned.
Yes. Yes.
And I hear that so many times from people who have gone through a death time with a parent that wasn't the greatest parent in the whole wide world.
Right.
And yet what they learned from that was profound for them. So I think we're kind of coming to an end, but I want to make sure that I haven't missed anything that I think is really important for you to share with us.
Yeah, one thing more I want to say about what you just said, that sometimes it is very difficult always in some form or another, it being with your parent, either being with them or when you lose them. There's an interesting thing that I experienced anyway, that no matter what age you are, I was quite young, relatively young when my mom died. My dad lost his dad when he was only 4 years old. It's such a deep psychological connection, biological connection, an energetic connection that you have with your parent, that if you didn't have a good experience or you didn't get to be with them when they passed, that the child holds regrets. And even if you're not a child, if you had a relationship with someone that was at odds, that you can either spend the rest of your life carrying that resentment, or you can expand your awareness just based upon trusting that what I've experienced and what I know and what I have validated over and over again is on the other side, it's all love. So you may lose your parent when you're early, but they become an even more capable cheerleader for you on the other side. You may have had a misaligned relationship with them on this side, but all the ducks are in a row on the other side. And if they were not capable of love and you wanted their love, they are from that perspective. So I just know it all transforms, and somehow we come into this experience forgetting that it's supposed to be a joyful adventure. So allowing that awareness to be, so that death doesn't, we don't get left with baggage, that we use it as that opportunity to grow. We ask ourselves, if I could transform this now, this experience now, so that love is my compass, what would it be? So I think death, it's hard to say. You have to hopefully understand the intention behind it, but death is a wonderful thing.
Yes. And what keeps us here, continuing the human experience, is what is part of who we are as humans, is that we want to survive.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's keeping us on this journey, rather than saying, oh, it's so going to be so great on the other side of this veil. Let's just get there. No,
right.
We have that human urge to stay here and be part of this life. So why not live it? And
it's a collaborative experience. And Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, he also wrote another book called Illusions, The Journey of a Reluctant Messiah. And, I believe everyone, whether you deny it or not, everyone, whether you're atheist, agnostic, even within that, there is a spirituality. Spirituality is your connection, whatever that relationship is, with the great mystery. Because none of us know. I don't even know with my near-death experience. That's what I experienced. But who knows really, But Jonathan, in Richard Bach's book, Illusions, because for many years, I wanted not to be here. It was hard. I couldn't make sense of it. In Illusions, he says, and I'm paraphrasing, like, if you think your mission on life is over or should be over, if you're still breathing, it's not. So I think that is true. As long as we're here, as long as we're meant to be here. And it's all about,
and sometimes we need people to assist us, and that's where you have taken the calling, Rhonda Hull, and said, I can, you're having some difficulties with your choices. Let's talk about it, and I'll help you through it. And that's been my experience with you. You've been really helpful in so many ways, where I could go back and sit with something that I needed to take a look at in a more whole way, in a fuller way. So thank you so much for this time. I feel like I know you better now.
Well, thank you. I'm hoping that it's of value, and it, just thinking about how all of the dots have come together and how all of the opportunities have prepared me. It is where I just stand here to be a sounding board and help dissolve the fear around death, so that we have fewer regrets, and so that we can live more fully here now.
And there are some people that are put here for, I really believe this, that there are some people that are put here to do exactly what you're doing, and you help us walk through this human experience in a less scary way.
Yeah, if we were meant to travel through the human experience alone, we would be the only one roaming around.
That's right. That's
So
right.
there are well over 7 billion of us on the planet. It's amazing how alone we can feel. And I think everybody really has a curiosity about death, but they just haven't yet experienced a safe place to explore it. So I just want to be that safe place.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for your service.
Yes, I love you. I love your service. I love that we are privileged, I think, to do what we do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
In